When we think of great presenters, we think of Martin Luther King Jr., Barack Obama, and maybe the guy from the Go Compare advert. But for the likes of you and me, presentations can be scary. And having done a load of different presentations to a variety of different audiences, I'm going to share with you today my top tips to engage your audience with your presentations. Hello and welcome back to Max Talks, where every Sunday I make videos to help you get to where you want to be. So my first tip for today is, before you even get to your presentation, is to know your content. If you don't know what you're talking about, that will be very, very clear to your audience. So make sure that you have a great understanding of what it is that you're going to be talking about, and as well, this will enable you not only to speak clearly and concisely in a way that maybe people who aren't as familiar with your subject will be able to understand, but it will also enable you to answer any potential questions that you get at the end of a presentation, which is normally the step. So at the end you would say, do you have any questions for me? And then if you know your content, then you'll be able to answer anything about that. The next one, again, is kind of one for going beforehand. So this is practicing your presentation. So this will become easier, again, if you know your content, then you can practice it, and you can practice your delivery. So once you know the content and what you're going to be delivering, you then need to think about the how you're going to deliver it. What parts are you going to emphasize? Some key considerations that you may want to think about is inflection. So this is essentially like the pitch of your voice. So if you're kind of talking like this for the whole presentation, that's not going to be very engaging for your audience. You need to alter the pitch. So if you're asking a question, at the end of your question, you might raise your voice a little bit so that the audience knows that you're asking them a question. And that enables them to listen. Whereas, as I said, if you just talk like this and you sound really boring, then no one's going to want to listen to you. So that is another key step. And also think about the tone and how you're coming across. So again, this comes from knowing your topic. If you're talking about something serious, then you might want to kind of keep your tone fairly serious, keep a serious expression on your face, and emphasize those key points. Use the volume of your voice. So if you're saying something really key, then you might want to say it really loudly so that the audience knows. If you feel like your audience is disengaging, then you could be a bit quieter and then raise your voice so that the audience pays attention to you. And again, if you're talking about something happy, or if you're going to crack a joke, definitely have a smile on your face, increase the tone, put some positive energy into it. Tip number 3, and I think this is one of the most important ones when you actually start your presentation, is to start confidently and relax. One of the most difficult things to do is to have a good start. And I think that this completely sets the tone for the rest of your presentation. If you start really nervously and you look like this and you start speaking really quietly, the audience is not going to engage with you, and people can tell if you're not confident about what you're talking about. Whereas if you talk, you're relaxed, maybe do some breathing exercises beforehand, have some deep breaths, revise and practice your content just beforehand, and then you can relax. And once you get that first sentence out there, even if you don't feel confident within yourself, use your head to imagine that you're confident. Imagine that you're Martin Luther King Jr., or imagine that you're that Go Compare man, and that should give you the confidence to present well. Once you've kind of started off in a positive and in a confident manner, everything else should flow naturally. All the practice that you've done leading up to your presentation and the fact that you know your content, it will all kind of come together. And that's why all of these things together is so important. So tip number 4 is pace. Pace is something which is very, very difficult to get right unless you have practiced. So again, this comes with that practice step. But a lot of people, when they present, they tend to speak really, really fast. So if
I present like this, you wouldn't really even hear what I'm saying because I'm talking so fast, and it's like I'm doing a rap song.
Whereas if you want to present effectively, you need to enable your audience to listen. So you need to have some pauses in there, like I'm doing now. Slow the pace up, add a bit of variety in there. Don't keep it all the same pace all the way along. You might want to have some sections where you speed up a little bit, and others, especially if you want people to listen, where you put in a pause. And even a 2-second pause where you don't say anything, that can seem like a lifetime for you. but for the audience, it doesn't really seem that bad. And all of the best speakers that you see or listen to, they will all use some strategic pauses in their presentations in order to get their point across. At this point, I want to kind of put this into practice, and in next week's video, I want to do a presentation to the camera that I've never seen before, and I want to get my housemates to prepare it. So if you want to see that and you want to see me practice what I'm preaching, feel free to leave a comment below and a like to let me know that you want to see that. My next step is eye contact. Making eye contact with your audience is super important because it shows that you're engaging with them. People like that humanistic approach. You might have heard the tip to imagine everyone in the audience naked. Now, to be honest, I don't feel like that's a very good idea, and that's not one that works for me. What works for me is, rather than making direct eye contact with specific people, especially if you're presenting to a large audience, if you're presenting to your class or to a seminar group or anything like that, a good tip is to scan over your audience. So don't just make eye contact with one specific person. People have a tendency to just look at the teacher, whereas if you kind of scan over and make eye contact with everyone glancing, you don't need to meet anyone's gaze. I know that it can be very difficult if your friends are in the class and you make eye contact with them and then you want to burst out laughing, but it makes it easier if you don't make direct eye contact with specific people and rather you gaze over everyone. Another one is use humour if possible. I'm not asking you to put presentation in where it doesn't belong, and of course your presentation is not a comedy routine unless it is, in which case hopefully you wouldn't need to be told that tip. But I think humour is a great way of engaging with your audience. With me, I don't try and kind of plan any humour in. Normally it just kind of comes. I'm not saying I'm a comedian or I'm a naturally funny person or anything like that. But I think even if you can add in something, it kind of engages the audience and people like to laugh. So I always try and put a bit of humour in my presentations. So make sure that it kind of comes naturally to you. And that links into my next tip, which is to be yourself. So one of the most important things about a presentation is that you don't pretend to be someone that you're not. The whole thing about you doing a presentation is that it's you connecting with your audience. So if you're trying to pretend to be someone and emulate their style, I would say that it's unlikely to work unless you're kind of trained in that and unless you've had a lot of different practice at that. So make sure that your presentation is your own, and that way it will come across naturally to you. Another one is to be creative. What can you do differently? How can you present in a different style or use different information that's not already out there? If you sit in any presentation, the vast majority of them are going to be PowerPoint presentations. But think, what can you do? Could you use a Prezi? Could you just kind of talk and freestyle it? One of the best presentations that I ever went to, like this guy just used one PowerPoint slide and he just spoke around his subject because he knew it that well and he'd clearly had practice and experience, and because he didn't have any slides to look at, we were just engaging and connecting with him as a presenter, and that was different and that made it really, really interesting for me. So think about how you can do something different which works for you. And again, this way, you're not going to be like everyone else. Your presentation is going to stand out. So maybe you could do it via a video. You could kind of put a bit of that into your presentation. You could add in some music, I don't know. Think about what works for your subject matter and for your presentation. My penultimate tip is to be relatable and use your own stories and experience. This again is one of the best things that you can do to relate to your audience. So this kind of goes in with like making sure that you know who you're talking to, and if you do know who you're talking to, you should be able to relate to them and kind of think about the experiences which you've had and which relate to your subject matter and that you can then tell. Before I do any presentations, I always try and figure out who I'm speaking to, and I try to think of an example of something that I've done or something that I can use, which is going to keep them engaged. People like to hear about you, and they like to hear about things that they might be able to achieve or things that might make them similar to you, because at the end of the day, as a presenter, you're trying to build a connection between you and your audience. And one of the best ways to do that is to tell stories that the audience can relate to. And then finally, my last tip is to ask questions to engage with your audience. This is one of the best ways to check not only that your audience is listening and paying attention, but also to plant some seeds of thought in the minds of the audience. So you'll notice that through the course of this video, I asked you about being creative. What can you do differently? This hopefully engaged you and made you think about any presentations that you might have had in the past and that you might have done, or maybe ones that you've got coming up. Again, you can engage with your audience. If you feel confident enough, you can ask them live. So you could ask a question about your topic and then hopefully take some answers, and then you can build on that. And that might help you to build a bit more of a creative approach to your presentation. So that's all I've got for you today. I hope that you enjoyed and that you found it useful. And let me know in the comments below which tip that you think you're going to use. And also if you want to see that on the spot presentation video next week. If you enjoyed, please leave a like rating, subscribe below for new content every single Sunday, and I will see you next Sunday.